I'm Eric Bolten, Vice President of Business Development, and with me is Paul Shore, our Senior Solution Architect. We have a system that allows you to monitor network statistics, content quality analytics, business impact analytics, while maintaining a 6 nines of uptime, ensuring the quality of service, allow you to have the ability to meet service level agreements, and ultimately provide the best possible quality of experience for the end consumer. Today we're going to do an overview demo of the entire ZEN Master control plane. We will be walking you through a series of workflows, and Paul is going to show how easy and manageable this is at an operational level. And with that, Mr. Shore, please take over.
Thanks, Eric. So here we have a diagram showing a basic Zixi deployment. We have the pre-existing components, which people are familiar with, of a Zixi feeder streaming to broadcasters running in a cloud environment, and then hand over an RTMP stream to a CDN. So ZEN Master provides a single cloud-based portal to connect to all of our remote devices, providing a single point of access and control, allowing a single entry point logon to provision streams across feeders and receivers and report on system health metrics. I log on to my demo production environment as the demo user. So when I log onto the system, the user is presented with the dashboard, which is a 30,000 foot view of my deployment and sources and channels and streams within the system. Here you can see a traffic light system showing green being something in good health. If there was an issue that needed looking at with a warning, I'd get an amber light, and red would indicate an immediate issue. We don't currently have any open issues in the system, but we do see a list of recent events in our log below. For the platform component pieces, the first 3 screens show us feeders, broadcasters, and receivers. Each screen is laid out in a similar fashion with a list of components at the top, and when we select the feeder here, you'll see that the bottom panel displays with more information. I can see information about the encryption keys I'm using to communicate with it, and other details about maybe the access tags, for example, here on the left. And on the right, I can see the available inputs that are active on that feeder right now, as well as their bit rates. Moving along the tabs, we're tracking history over time. So we're not just reporting on current CPU and disk, but we can go back through history and use tools for root cause analysis. If I want to look at something last week, I can expand the graph and even use the mouse controls to zoom in on particular moments in time. Like, for example, when I seem to have a communication drop here, which could correlate with an event in the logs to help us troubleshoot. To connect pre-existing systems to ZEN Master, the Configuration Help tab provides us with some information on the steps that we need to take. Receiver's screen is identical, receivers being a mirror of a feeder. Feeder is the entry point to the Zixi platform, and receiver is the egress point. The broadcaster screen shows us a list of broadcast clusters. In the top panel, each broadcast cluster contains 1 or more broadcasters, and we can connect multiple broadcasters to a cluster or even provision them within cloud environments. Again, when I select a cluster in the top screen, the details panel populates with more information, and I can see the type of cluster that it is, as well as access the individual broadcasters within the system.
So you've now entered that as an administrator, so you can set permissions to allow different groups to see different things depending on how you want to allow access?
The administrator can create users and groups and apply roles to different tags. Tags can be applied to components within the system, such as feeders or even the streams. And then any user that logs in with given rights to a particular tab will have access to the level of information they need. So moving on from the platform itself to the streams, here we have the sources pane. Initially I get a list at the top here, and we can see that I have 2 active sources in the system. They're green, they're connected. One of them has this padlock and is encrypted. We can see where the source is being streamed from and the broadcaster cluster that it's streaming to. We can also see deeper information about content analysis and if there are any continuity errors and that kind of thing in the TR101 analyzer. And again, we see the uptime and bit rate and the IP address of the source. When I select a source in the top panel, the details pane populates with more information. And if you're familiar with feeders and broadcasters, you'll see that I have access to the PAT table here and can look at individual elementary streams and PIDs within them. This will show me my video and audio tracks, but also highlight if there are PIDs for isolated SCSI-35, closed captions, and other metadata. We're also showing content analysis of the stream. Zixi's always been able to report on network level metrics such as packet loss, jitter, and round trip times, but we can go deeper inside the streams. We can show you content analysis of things like frozen video now, black picture, silent audio, low quality video, and audio clipping. So looking inside the essence of the individual PIDs. All of this information is tracked over time on the history pane, and again we can use the controls to look back over time to see if there are issues with the stream at particular dates. Here we can see this stream has had some audio issues over time, and I can isolate particular statistics from a graph just to look at a particular piece of information that I'm needing.
And you're sampling all of this in band, correct?
This is all in band. Nothing adds any latency here. It's not handing off to an external monitoring system or anything. It's all being done whilst the stream is in flight. Every component has localized events which can be searched and looked through that are related to that system. And if we want to manually configure a stream to push from something like an integrated encoder, information is supplied here for those manual steps as well. Once we have our sources, then we'll need to create a channel. The channel will be the outbound portion of a broadcaster's workflow. And for a channel, we can have one or a secondary source as well as a backup redundant failover. And then our individual targets, one or many targets could be of different types, such as integrated IRDs, standalone Zixi receivers, third-party tools that are pulling that we don't have access to, or even S3 buckets and RTMP targets and that kind of thing. So first of all, I'll create a channel. You can see that I have 3 types of channel I can create. A pass-through will be a single source coming into the cluster and leaving. If an encoder is building a set of variants for delivering adaptive streaming, we can create a channel that groups all those together and delivers the final HLS or dash. And if Zixi is required to do the actual transcoding from a high bitrate mezzanine, we can apply those transcode profiles here in the channel too. I'll create a pass-through channel today. Choose the cluster. Choose my source. And here I can apply access tags just like with other components in the system. Once I've created my channel, the next thing I can do is apply a target to it. And for that, we can head to the Targets tab. You can see I've got some pre-assigned targets here as well. I've already got an RTMP to YouTube target set up. If we look at that, you'll see the kind of things you might expect: a URL ingest point, a stream name, and some credentials of where to push into YouTube. And in the background here, I've already got my YouTube live streaming portal open, and you can see there's currently no content being delivered. So back to ZEN Master, if we assign our targets to our channel, we see that the target moves to an OK state. So we've started delivering data, and then back to YouTube. Should be a few moments before we start a CL stream. After a few moments, we can see our stream is being delivered to YouTube, and we can check it in the YouTube's backend player. Other target types include HTTP push targets, such as Akamai Net Storage, RTMP for delivering to things like playout servers, or social targets like Facebook or YouTube, Zixi pull and Zixi push to other Zixi broadcasters and receivers, and also UDP and RTP out with FEC if required.
So you're showing an OTT workflow by using YouTube as an example, but you could use this for delivery to an IRD, to any MSO.
Yeah, we can be deploying across ZEN Master for large-scale contribution, live distribution, backhaul, satellite replacement, and other workflows. We then have a global events log. Here, logs from all components are aggregated together, and we get some search tools to allow us to hone in on specific events very quickly, such as searching across access tags or particular types of streams or broadcasters, and by name and within certain date ranges. Another important feature of ZEN Master is the remote access tool. This allows us to forward the communications and management portals of connected encoders and IRDs. So here, the encoder connected to my remote feeder behind a firewall is an OBE device, and because I have access privileges, I can get right to the interface of that remote system straight through the ZEN Master portal.
But you could look at, in theory, any number of our OEM partners, correct?
Absolutely. We're also able to track licenses. Here you can see that I have some licenses I'm tracking in the system, and when I select one, ZEN Master is informing me of the exact features that I have enabled and my usage across the last time period for this license as well. I can even look at the exact activations for each box that's come from this license. And ZEN Master will proactively report on whether a license is going to expire in the near future, or if I have headroom on a large activation that's reaching its limit. So, as well as connecting to pre-existing components, feeders, broadcasters, receivers, etc., ZEN Master also allows us to provision cloud infrastructure dynamically from this single portal. Here I'm back in the broadcaster screen, and I'm going to launch a brand new broadcast cluster.
So while you're provisioning this now in AWS, you just showed us how we could get into different social networks, CDNs, and even MSOs, but this is how you can actually manage a multi-cloud infrastructure, is that right?
Yes, ZEN Master is able to launch across AWS, GCP, Azure, and as well as connect to broadcasters living in any other public cloud. Here I'm going to apply different privileges to the cluster itself. We could use ZEN Master to separate functionality such as ingest, egress, and transcoding, but I'm going to let this cluster perform all those functions. And here I select my pre-configured AWS account.
But you raise a good point, Paul, so that while you are setting up a single cluster, if you were going to do intra-cloud workflow, where you would have an ingest and egress clusters, you can use this to manage that and have Zixi support that traffic within the cloud.
Yes, and ZEN will be able to dynamically pull streams between different clouds depending on their purpose and where they need to be. ZEN Master also now supports DTLS, which is the open standard for UDP encryption. And if we wish, we could even lock down at the security group of AWS to IP whitelist for certain receiver targets. Now that I've chosen the correct AWS environment, you can see that ZEN Master is dynamically pulling back information from my account. So I'm going to select my nearest AWS region and some networking pieces like VPC and subnet, as well as my security group for the all-important Zixi UDP ports. And then finally, I'm going to want to select and configure my instances. So Amazon provides many instance types, some of which are not suitable for running Zixi broadcasters or streaming video, but here we've provided a cut-down list for the exact instance types that are optimized for Zixi's platform. I'll select a C5 large here. We can see dynamic live pricing coming back from AWS. Because I want some redundancy, I'll put 3 broadcasters in this cluster. Apply my license key, set the default password, and finally we get to choose the broadcaster version itself. Most people would choose the most recent version with latest features and fixes, but if you have an environment that requires a specific version, there's a selection available to choose from. Lastly, I'll make ZEN Master the authority on who's allowed to connect to the cluster. Any stream coming into the cluster or a request to pull a stream from the cluster, and the broadcaster will turn around to ZEN Master and inquire that is allowed to do so. Finally, it'll just take a few minutes for the instances to come up. You can see I already have a cluster with 3 instances in a pending state, and over the next 2 or 3 minutes, the instances will be launched via API calls into AWS. They will be the broadcaster version that we chose will be installed. It'll be licensed, and the connection back to ZEN will be completed. I can launch clusters in multiple availability zones. And ZEN Master also supports clusters that are spread across different data centers and even as a primary path or a secondary path. We can have streams load balanced across an entire cluster, or we can choose to go over a primary route and fail over to a backup route in case of an issue. So here, after a few minutes, my broadcasters should be up. We can see now the cluster contains 3 broadcasters. They have their Amazon instance IDs. We can see our public IP addresses, and we're monitoring CPU, RAM, and we can see the version that we selected there as well. If we want to access it directly, we can do that. And when I log in, we'll see the broadcaster has an uptime of just under 2 minutes, and we're licensed and ready to go.
So at this point, you're showing the interface to the actual server itself.
Correct. Everything can be controlled from the central dashboard. And just to show that, I'll go back to the sources, and rather than look at a pre-existing source, let's launch a new source to that cluster. Again, we can add sources, add components from the screen just like before. And with sources, I get a few different types of source I can launch depending on whether we want to just monitor a pre-existing stream or receive something from a partner device that we don't have access to, or an integrated encoder. But because in this particular case we have full API access to both the feeder and the new cluster, I'll configure a full configure and monitor input. You can see I can choose the feeder that I want to bring the source from. I can choose any of the available streams that are active. Select the new cluster, and again provide an access tag. We also provide tools to enter the usual Zixi parameters of latency, encryption, password credentials, and we can even alert on PID changes here. If audio PIDs changed or something like that, or something dropped out, we can monitor that too. Just save my source. Again, it'll take a few minutes for this stream to come up. So you can see after a minute, my source is now active. It's green. It's in a good state. It's encrypted with this little padlock icon. We can see where it's streaming from and the cluster that is streaming to. So this stream was just being provisioned over the course of a few minutes, brought up from scratch to a cluster in the cloud that didn't exist until 5 minutes ago. And again, when we select the stream, we can see our detailed panel below, and we'll begin recording the history metrics from now on.
So you're basically able to spin up an entire channel within 10 minutes or less.
Correct. We also have the matrix view. Here I can see all of my channels with updating thumbnails. I've only got 3 in this system, so they all fit on one screen. If I had many hundreds of channels in the system, which is easily supported by ZEN Master, we can set controls to just rotate through those. So if you've got them on a knock wall or something like that in an operations room, an operator will see each channel is in a good state over the course of a couple of minutes. You'll see every channel come by.
So you have a way to put eyes on glass, but at a really hundreds of channel scale, and that's all supported by alerts that would let you know things that might not be visually obvious.
Correct. ZEN Master's in production today with environments with hundreds of endpoints, hundreds of channels, and users are able to much more easily monitor large deployments. ZEN Master also supports Hitless Failover. I can select a new channel. I can create a new channel and select multiple sources as part of my Hitless group. And Zixi's support for Hitless Failover is an extension and improvement on SMPTE 22-7. So we'll be able to pull streams from diverse network paths, even without RTP time packet headers, and recombine them into a single hitless output at the target.
So SMPTE 22.7 is really for a managed IP network and only maybe 2 or 3% packet loss. We're now doing this over the open internet, and we're using a DNA sequencing algorithm with patent pending technology to achieve the building of these streams.
It's pretty smart stuff, correct.
Well, Paul, thank you for that overview of ZEN Master. I think it shows that this is really truly a unique and industry-changing tool set. It allows you to maintain 6 nines of uptime, have views to network statistics, content quality analytics, business impact analysis, and allows you to actually see everything from your source through an affiliate and a partner all the way to the distribution, whether it's multi-cloud, multi-CDN, or out to the traditional MSOs. Please contact Zixi to see how ZEN Master can help you with your workflows today.